Hello, I'm John D, and this is Charge Up Australia, the podcast that tells you everything you need to know about electric vehicles, both here and overseas. This is what's coming up on our first episode. We'll be talking to EV entrepreneur Michelle Nazzari, the founder and CEO of FONZ MOTO. It's the Australian company that's earned a strong reputation for stylish electric motorbikes right here in Australia. We'll also be talking to Bridie Schmidt from the NRMA and Sarah Aubrey from Electrify This as part of an in-depth look into media misinformation about electric vehicles here in Australia. But first, here's the latest news on electric vehicles. The Electric Vehicle Council has announced that there are now 300,000 electric vehicles on Australian roads. 248,000 of those cars are full battery electric, and over 53,000 are plug-in hybrids. Over 200 street dog electric motorbikes have already been sold in New Zealand, and now they're coming to Australia. The street dog is an urban motorbike with a starting price of $11,260. Its top speed ranges from 50 to 80 kilometres an hour, and it has a range of up to 180 kilometres. It has a removable battery, and it's available to order now from ftnmotion.com. Australian buyers are now getting their hands on the latest addition to BYD's growing lineup. The BYD Sea Lion 7 has officially launched in Australia, with deliveries already underway. The all-electric SUV offers a range of up to 482 kilometres, and it starts at around $55,000 plus on-road costs. It's available to order now from bydautomotive.com.au. And finally, Norway is still leading the world with EV adoption, at least from a percentage point of view. Last year, nearly 90% of new vehicles sold in Norway were electric. In January, however, fully electric passenger vehicles made up 96% of new car sales. The top-selling car was Toyota's BZ4X, with the Volkswagen ID.4 in second place. FONZ MOTO is an Australian company pioneering the two-wheel space. They've earned a strong reputation for stylish electric motorbikes and mopeds right here in Australia. The company's founder, Michelle Nazzari, began her journey in electric transport back in 2007 with BCI in Perth. Using her engineering expertise, Michelle designed Australia's first electric two-wheelers and in 2019 launched the FONZ NKD, Australia's first retailed electric motorbike. Her achievements in the sustainability sector earned her a 2023 Telstra Best of Business Award. Michelle is one of Australia's leading EV entrepreneurs, and she joins us now. Michelle, thanks for joining us. What inspired you to start an electric vehicle company? Was there a specific event or idea that kind of sparked all this?
Yeah, there were kind of two sparks, I would say. The first, I was working in my family business. We manufacture buses and coaches, and I was really excited to work on a project where we manufactured and brought to market the first hybrid electric vehicles in Australia in 2008. And then we moved on to electric buses. In 2010, I took a 6-week motorbike trip around Colombia, and I realised I couldn't work another moment with my father. We are very, very similar. And so I started to come up with the concept for FONZ, what is today FONZ.
Now, for people who haven't seen your motorbikes, I mean, they're very stylish, they're very nice. Can you describe them for the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. We have two product ranges. We have one which are the electric road scooters. That line is called Arthur, and they're a series where we've got several different iterations that we've been bringing out for a number of years. And then we have NKD, the electric motorbikes, which we make locally here in Australia. They're street legal beasts. They can do 0 to 100 in 3.9 seconds, and they're a lot of fun. The scooters are a much more commercial product. Some people say they're like an electric Vespa. We tend to say that they're just a very stylish two-wheel road bike.
Now, FONZ has been around as a company since 2014. What kind of progress are you making?
Look, it was a very slow start in the early days when we launched our first scooters. it was, the market was very young. In Australia, the uptake was very slow in those early years. It's really been since around 2019 that we've seen quite strong growth year on year. So we're in an exciting stage right now where we're a mainstream product, and people don't just buy us because we're electric. They buy it just because it's a scooter that works very well for their lifestyle.
Now, tell us about your customers. Who are they? What kind of age are they? And why have they made that switch to electric motorbikes?
Yeah. Our customer base is, I would say, 35 to 55 plus. We skew quite heavily towards female. So it's around 35% female, 65% male, which is quite a large percentage of women compared to the motorcycle industry as a whole. Many of our customers live right in the city, and we also have a lot of rural and regional customers. We don't tend to have a lot of customers that will commute quite a distance, say on a motorway, not really designed for those longer highway rides.
I'm keen to find out more about the day-to-day experience of living with an electric motorbike and using an electric motorbike. What does a day look like? How do you recharge them, for example?
Yeah, so we specialise in various options for charging. So you can charge with Type 2. If you have an electric car already, you can use exactly the same infrastructure. That's an optional extra. You can remove your power pack and charge it in your office if that's convenient to you. And you can also charge directly from bike to wall socket. So if you had a garage or a carport.
So I guess the overnight charging, do you find most people are charging overnight? I know with I've got a BYD Seal, and so we either, if it's a sunny day, I'll charge it in the daytime because I can use my solar, I can use, the cheap grid electricity. But most of the time, you often are charging it overnight if you've got to get a very big charge in. Do a lot of people do that?
Yeah, most people are charging overnight when people don't really think about how long does it take to charge, because you just plug it in as it's convenient to you. For me personally, whether I drive my electric car to work or I ride my electric scooter, I just charge both of them at work because I also have solar on our roof and at our factory.
For many people, one of the obstacles to buying electric vehicles is the whole issue of how do you get them serviced? Because I don't think people realise how much simpler electric vehicles are to service. So many less parts to go wrong, right?
Yeah. So with most of our customers, they'll come to FONZ or a FONZ authorised repairer around Australia. It's an annual service. Usually the interval is every 5,000 kilometres or once a year. It's a capped price. It's very simple to service the vehicle, and year on year, you'll find there's more and more savings compared to a combustion engine. We do mobile service, which is really convenient for people, and we're just launching in 2025 where we're servicing them on our own scooter fleet. So around Sydney to start off with, we're doing a pilot where we'll go out to you and we'll be able to service from a scooter to a scooter.
A lot of people who make the switch to electric vehicles are, I guess, surprised by how much money they save on a day-to-day basis. If you have a FONZ electric motorbike compared to, say, a conventional petrol-powered motorbike, what are the kind of savings you're going to experience?
The cost of running a petrol bike, if you say travel 100 Ks a week, is probably $7 to $10 a week. So you're looking maybe $350 to $500. The cost of running electric, if you're paying for it, if it's not on solar, you're probably looking at around 83 cents to $1 a week. You're looking at maybe $100 per annum.
You're an entrepreneur. As anyone who's watching this who runs their own company, there's a certain joy you get from running your own company. What joy do you get out of running a company that actually makes electric motorbikes? Is there something added to that?
Yeah, look, it's exhilarating. I wanted to do something positive. This is definitely positive. I love our community. We do community rides. It's fun to be around these people. We're all in an area where we're very passionate about. Riders tend to really care about what they're doing. It's a hobby. It's part of your transport, but it's part of your joy as well. So I love that.
Your electric motorbike has a very stylish Vespa style. It's got a very Italian kind of look. Are you only selling in Australia? Because surely this is the kind of bike that could easily sell overseas.
We currently sell in Australia and New Zealand, and we're very interested in European markets, and we can see that there's a great product fit. However, we really require investment for that. So at this stage, we're selling in Australia and New Zealand.
So let's talk about the investment side of things. It's a privately owned company.
Yeah.
How have you funded it so far? Has it been bootstrapped very much by yourself?
Yeah, it has been bootstrapped by myself, and we've now got a few very small angel investors, but I'm the majority shareholder, and some of my staff also have shareholdings in the company, which is pretty cool.
And so Why did you go that route, getting your staff involved and giving them shares in the company? That must make for a very collegiate atmosphere in the workplace.
Teamwork makes the dream work. Is that right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's an important part of it. One dream, one team. We have to work hard. It's a big mission, what we're doing. So keep us all together and on the same track.
Everyone who's going to be coming on this podcast is really passionate about electric vehicles. They're evangelical about it almost. What excites you most about electric vehicles? What do you think the future, where is the future in electric vehicles here in Australia?
I really believe in EVs. I'm, practicing what I preach. Our whole household is electrified. It's better for the environment. It's fun. The tech is evolving. It's an exciting time to be a part of this.
If you look at FONZ as a company, you started it in 2014, shifting motorbikes.
Yes.
What have you learned in that time as an entrepreneur, as someone who's passionate about electric mobility? What have you learned over the years that you would tell yourself back then?
That's a great question. Look, I think for me personally as an entrepreneur, I've wanted to be so innovative and do so many things, and now it's a little bit more about slowing down and locking things down in a really strong way. And we're very focused on retail. We're very focused on the scooters right now because it's the most impactful. So I'm not saying I would really slow it down, but I think that's what my learnings have been as an entrepreneur in this space.
Other people are noticing how well you're running the company, how well you're communicating it to the wider community. You won a Telstra Business Award for that. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it was great to have that recognition. We won an award for Telstra Business of the Year for our work in sustainability at the National Awards in 2023. It was great to go through that due diligence process and really reflect on our business, what we were doing well and what impact we were having and measuring it. As a small business, you don't really have that time to reflect, and it was an important process and we learned a lot.
Now, you are a small business. Small businesses don't have access to very big marketing budgets. How do you engage the community, the FONZ family of owners of your bikes? Is there a way that you pull everyone together?
Yeah, we do community rides once a month. We do them in Sydney because our biggest market is Sydney at the moment. We're very interested to expand that to other states in 2025. That's one of our favourite ways. We hang out where people park motorbikes in the CBD and evangelise to them, which is quite fun and strange. We do have a smaller budget than some of our competitors, but we really kind of stretch it as much as possible.
Let's look 5 years from now. You're going really well as a company. Hopefully you'll start expanding and exporting overseas. Where would you like to be in 5 years' time?
I think for the two-wheel space, I'd really like to be in Europe. I think there's a great opportunity for us there. We're also working on some other concepts for 2025, which are EV adjacent. So what other things can we do that have a good sustainability impact where we can use our two wheels to do other exciting things? So watch the space.
A final question. For people who are sitting on the fence when it comes to electric vehicles, maybe they're not quite ready to make that jump, what advice would you give them that would enable them to switch away from the polluting old way of getting around to the clean electric way of getting around?
A lot of people say, I ride all the time when I'm in Thailand or Bali or what have you, and I just wouldn't consider it in Australia, but I'd love to get electric, but I can't afford it or I'm not ready to spend that much money. I would say get your license. It's so easy to do. It takes so little time, and then you save so much time. You don't have to think about parking anymore, and you don't have to think about going to a petrol station. Just make the switch.
For people who do want to get more information on FONZ, find out about the bikes, find out about the company, where do they go for that information?
Go to fonzmoto.com.
Excellent. Now, Michelle, I do want to say to you, you're very inspiring. It's so great to see an Australian creating an electric vehicle company here, making a success of it. Well done.
Thanks very much.
Thanks for coming on. In each episode of Charge Up Australia, we'll tackle an issue related to electric vehicles. I'll cover the basics and then I'll bring in expert guests to dive deeper into the topic. In this first episode, we're addressing electric vehicle misinformation. Here in Australia and abroad, media stories about EVs are often riddled with inaccuracies. I've been an environmentalist since 1986 and there's a bit of deja vu going on here. In the early 90s, there was a lot of misinformation about recycling, but that settled down and we all got used to doing our bit with our recycling. I've seen the same misinformation in the past about climate change and renewable energy. Even though renewable energy has proven time and again that it's the cheapest form of energy out there, that misinformation is still ongoing, as it is for climate change as well. The EV transition is the latest victim of this misinformation. Some of it is really blatant, but it's very easy to prove that it's wrong. Let's go to the panel and look at this in more detail. Bridie Schmidt is the EV Hub editor for Australia's largest motoring organisation, the NRMA. She was also previously the associate editor at The Driven, where she covered Australia's electric vehicle market. Sarah Aubrey is a passionate EV advocate and the driving force behind the popular Facebook group Electric Vehicles for Australia. She's also the creator of the social media channel Electrify This, where she brilliantly demystifies electric vehicles. So definitely worth a follow on TikTok, YouTube and Instagram. I'm very glad to say they join us now. Guys, thank you very much for coming on Charge Up Australia. Before we get into the misinformation and the negativity, let's talk about the positives about electric vehicles. Why do you guys like electric vehicles so much?
Look, I think to start with, EVs are part of a final piece of the puzzle in reducing Australia's carbon emissions. Transport-related emissions account for almost 20% of emissions in Australia. And apart from that, EVs are just really nice to drive.
I think also the health benefits, we don't really talk about that a great deal. Billions and billions of dollars in health savings and lives saved. So making our cities cleaner would be my massive positive.
I think you're absolutely right. I think the quietness as well, not just for you when you're driving, I think as well, but everyone around you makes such a difference, doesn't it?
Yeah, noise. Stress itself. You live on a busy road that has terrible implications for people's health. So again, quiet streets, happier people.
Let's go on to the misinformation. I think we need to talk about that side of things. Bridie, from your perspective, what do you think are the main misconceptions out there at the moment in the media that are kind of cutting through to the public in a negative way?
Yeah, historically speaking, the main barriers to uptake have been around driving range of EVs and the price of EVs. But what we really see a lot in the media now, in social media and mainstream media, is concerns around battery fires and also, misconceptions about how long EV batteries last and how much they might cost to replace if they need to be replaced.
So from an environmental perspective, Sarah, what's the real story about the environmental impacts of when it comes to producing electric vehicles?
I do get the EVs are bad for the environment all the time on my social media accounts. They don't really explain how, but what they do tend to do is focus on just the manufacturing and not the lifetime emissions from that vehicle. So sure, when you manufacture an EV, it has higher carbon emissions than a petrol or diesel car. However, so I looked this up to make sure I was specific about it. According to Bloomberg New Energy Finance, when you take into the whole life of the car, EVs can emit up to 70% fewer emissions than petrol and diesel cars, up to 70%. And that doesn't take into account the fuel going into those vehicles. When you don't, they haven't counted what it costs to extract and distribute and refine, take that fuel, put it all over the world. And the tankers, 40% of tankers on the ocean right now are carrying fossil fuels. So I could charge my car from the roof of my house. That fuel doesn't have to travel very far. So I think that's also something we need to take into account. So once you take that into account, they're even better for the environment.
Now, there's a lot of misinformation about EV batteries. I remember I've got a quote here. Ian Plimer, a geologist, not a car expert, but a geologist, said the cost of replacing the batteries is horrendous. That was his quote, right?
Right.
And there's other articles saying EV batteries only last 8 years, So do you find that when you're talking to people, they simply are unaware just how resilient those batteries are and the fact that they will likely have a life of their own after the car has finished being used?
Look, I think some of the perceptions have come about for a start, from people equating a battery in an EV to the battery in a mobile phone. So, yeah, I think that people have historically thought that EV batteries don't last long because they're thinking about mobile phone batteries. And then we've also had a problem of reporters in the news saying, well, the warranty is for 8 years or even 10 years, and therefore the battery is useless after that, which is completely incorrect. There is some degradation in the batteries after a certain amount of time. Those batteries can be used in a second life for home storage. But more importantly, what we're seeing now is some research that's come out where researchers showed that the actual longevity of the batteries is up to 38% longer than what initial lab tests were when the batteries were designed and made. And, it just goes to show that this is a technology that's got longevity and it's worth investing in.
I'm glad you mentioned that whole issue of the second life of batteries. I remember back in 2017, I went over to Japan to see what Mitsubishi were doing. And their very first electric cars were coming to the end of their natural life, and they were taking the batteries out, going through them to check which bits were okay, replacing the bits that weren't quite up to scratch, and then putting a brand new case on it and then leasing it to factories, to capture that daytime sun and then get them through the peak time of the day. So an opportunity to save money with those, second-hand batteries. But let's maybe talk, the other issue associated with batteries, of course, is battery fires. I mean, the biggest clickbait headline, I guess, is anytime an electric vehicle anywhere in the world goes up in smoke, it gets global headlines in a way that when a petrol vehicle or a diesel vehicle goes up in smoke, you never hear about it in any way, anywhere near the same degree. Why do you think that is still continuing?
It's something that people aren't familiar with the technology. So when they hear about something like, an EV catching fire, that's more likely to be of interest in the news. We don't hear about internal combustion engine vehicles catching fire because it happens so often. So since 2010, we know that there's only been 9 verified electric vehicle fires that have been associated with a battery, and that data comes from EV FireSafe, an Australian company that's backed by the Australian Department of Defence. And there is a research from Swinburne University that says that internal combustion engine fires are 20 to 80 times more likely.
I did also read, there was an article I read that said, 9 fires over the last 14 years in Australia, okay? Would you like to know how many fires in just New South Wales Fire and Rescue are called out to every single day?
Would love to know.
7. On average, 7 fires for petrol and diesel cars every single day.
So that's just petrol and diesel cars every day in New South Wales. Wow, I never knew that.
We don't hear about that in the headlines, do we? And it's like, man...
Well, you'd run out of space. Let's face it. Now, there seems to be a lot of focus on what is called range anxiety. And that is a real blocker, I think. What advice would you give to people who have range anxiety and that is what's stopping them from getting an electric car?
Well, Bridie, how many kilometres did you travel to come down here today?
Oh, well, I travelled about 800 kilometres to get here. I live in northern New South Wales. I do that trip very often. The East Coast trips are quite good because there is a lot more charging infrastructure now these days. But my advice to people would be get to know your EV, maybe even hire an EV for a week, see what it's like to live in, get to understand, the factors that might reduce the range of the EV. It's the same with a petrol car, but we just don't think about it as much because we're still in a stage of infrastructure rollout. And if you think about the fact that when internal combustion engine cars were invented, there were no petrol stations. Yes. They had the same problem, but the difference is now that we have electricity everywhere. So it's just learning a different way of charging and a different way of living with our vehicles.
What I found really interesting is going through the news.com.au website, because Paul Barry mentioned on Media Watch that there were 39 stories earlier this year that were negative about electric vehicles. And I thought, I wonder what the whole of year figure was for 2024. Over 130 negative stories about electric vehicles. It was quite shocking just how many negative stories there were that you will not see about conventional vehicles.
Honestly, I don't think it's shocking at all. I like to track what's happening in the UK because they're, 1 to 2 years ahead of us at least in their uptake. And I remember at the end of 2023, Ginny Buckley from Electrifying, they had that episode where they talked about the year and she said it was the worst year she had ever seen for disinformation and articles written by the Sun and articles like that. But every day I think the Sun were writing a negative article about EVs. And you have to wonder why. What interests are these businesses protecting?
Is it the advertisers who maybe large car companies who haven't quite made the swifter moves that they need towards electric vehicle technology? Are they looking after them?
Advertising pays the bills. You've got to protect your advertisers. In Australia, the Japanese car companies are nowhere near where they need to be, and they're spending the money with the networks. They're spending the money in the newspapers, and they're going to protect those interests. So that's why you see loads of ads for hybrids and you don't see – and when was the last time you even saw an ad for a small car? It's all big cars as well to make a profit.
Yeah, if you look at the RAND report from Comms Declare, which I contributed to, the most money is spent on SUV and ute advertising in Australia. And what you're talking about is the brand effect. So basically any media outlet that gets a lot of advertising dollars from a brand is less likely to criticise that brand or that brand's products.
Let's talk about social media. It's quite interesting just how negative a lot of the electric vehicle coverage is on social media. Why is it so bad?
It's toxic.
It is toxic, right?
It is bad. I think we're talking decades of advertising that have conditioned men, and I say men, not all men, but primarily I am trolled by men. Decades of advertising to condition men that that box on four wheels is somehow linked to your male identity. And so somehow, somewhere, an electric car is challenging that.
What's your thoughts on that, Bridie?
Well, I think all you have to do is look at Daniel Bleakley's channel on YouTube, Miners in Teslas, and the reactions that he got when he took his Tesla up to northern Queensland and put a bunch of miners in Teslas. They loved it.
Yeah, no, that was a really good,
I
that
think
was a great series.
The secret is getting people behind the wheel.
Yeah.
That's it. It's hard to deny.
What's happening on social media is to try and stop the uptake, right? I believe it won't even be myth busting. It won't be positive stories that we put out about it. In the end, what will actually facilitate the uptake of electric cars is your neighbour will buy one and you'll find out how much money they're saving by not having a massive fuel bill. And they're charging it from their roof for free. They'll be like, what? And then they'll go for a ride and it'll be like, so quiet, so lovely.
There's actually quite a lot of articles out there that say electric vehicles sales are just a flash in the pan. The sales are crashing. They're tanking. I've read the word tanking. Plunging, So it's interesting though how this narrative is out there, but whenever I'm actually checking real world data, especially from places like China, the world's biggest motoring economy, the sales of electric vehicles last year passed the halfway mark, right? More than 50% of new cars being sold in China are now electric. We never hear anything about it in the Australian media.
And we're going to hear a lot more about it soon because we're having a lot more new brands coming from China. In the months from January to September, 2/3 of the world's EVs were sold in China.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's a 25% increase from last year, 40% increase in China alone. So 15 million EVs sold worldwide this year and almost 10 million of those in China.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah, huge numbers.
And again, if you have a headline that says things like, sales are plunging, no one's interested, all this sort of thing, it feeds into that fear and uncertainty and doubt. And then people go, maybe I'm not so sure about electric cars. People seem to be not sure about them. They're not buying that. It's all to try and stymie sales and stymie the uptake.
Talking of stymieing sales, is that why we're still seeing articles about hydrogen cars, that maybe you should wait, avoid the electric car, the battery-powered electric car? Those hydrogen cars look like they'd be far more convenient.
That one has not come up for a while, and it came up today, and I was like, oh, hydrogen re-entered the chat. I haven't seen you for a while. No. Look, I think they've missed the boat with passenger cars. I think we can all just put that one to bed.
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? And if you look in California last year, how many of the hydrogen fuel stations got shut down? So many of them couldn't get supplied. When they did get supplied, the cost of hydrogen was just enormous. But let's just look at that hydrogen issue. What is being raised in the media is that, but hydrogen is so much more like petrol in that you can literally drive into a station and within minutes you've fully charged, you've filled up your car, you're fully charged and ready to go. And you can't do that with battery-powered cars.
Well, wouldn't the oil companies love that, tying us to another energy source that we have to go to somewhere to get when we can make electricity on our roofs with solar panels?
I think the idea of a decentralised refueling of transport, and same with, powering our homes as well, the same applies, is very dangerous to people with very powerful deep pockets. We've never, ever in the history of the world ever seen such powerful companies as the fossil fuel industry.
Now, Bridie, you've just driven a long way to get here today. I mean, I find that when I go up to northern New South Wales in an electric car, what I like about it is the fact that after 3 hours of driving, I want to stop. Remember the campaign Stop, Revive, Survive? You're supposed to stop every 2 to 3 hours, have a break, have a coffee, have a toilet break, have something to eat. To me, whenever I'm doing these long trips, it's a perfect time to recharge a car. So when you're recharging and reviving yourself, the car is doing the same.
No, 100%. When I'm driving from home to Sydney or vice versa, I'll typically stop 3 times. I'll stop for about 10 to 15 minutes in Coffs Harbour and somewhere around, Tuggerah or Raymond Terrace. But we'll always stop in the middle of the day at Port Macquarie. And the crazy thing is people think that you're going to be sitting around waiting for your car to charge, but actually we plug it in, we go to the loo, we have lunch, and 9 times out of 10, the car's ready to go before we are.
A final question with regards to Electrify This on social media. What are the stories and issues you're putting out there that are getting the strongest response from the public?
When I tell a positive story about electric vehicles, so for example, I did a post on a EV battery recycling plant that's opened in southern Germany, and they can recycle 96% of the battery. Wow. Well, that post, I'll just give you one example about how this post has been targeted. I had another post, which was about air conditioning, 1.2 million views, and it had about 450 comments. That's pretty standard for such a massive viewed post, right? Massively viewed post. That EV battery recycling post has had about 65,000 views. It's had over 2,200 comments, and nearly all of them are negative. So it's been targeted. They don't like me telling positive stories about electric cars. And that says to me that what I'm doing is working.
Well, I just want to say to both of you, thanks for coming on our first episode, because you've both got a lot of credibility. Having your writing going out about electric vehicles on the NRMA website, that's a great coup to have. So, and great to see you on there. And thank you so much for the work you're doing on social media, because I think putting out those positive stories is so critically important. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks, John.
My pleasure.
That was the first episode of Charge Up Australia. Thanks for joining us. I'd like to thank BYD Australia for sponsoring this podcast. While the podcast is powered by BYD, this series will cover the benefits of all EV car brands and all types of electric vehicles. If you have any questions about the topics in this episode, send me a personal question via Blue Sky or LinkedIn, or check out the website at chargeup.news. I'm John D. See you on the next episode.